You know, when I'm asked to reflect on my time at an event that I've spent 20 plus years of my life at, I have these visions of different finishes come across. I see faces with tears in them. I see faces of joy. I see faces of disbelief that they can't believe they did it. But the thing that affects me most, especially here in Topol, is the community. It's almost like every spectator is doing the race with the athletes. They're out on the course with the thousands of volunteers. They're running alongside everybody. And this island of New Zealand is, I believe, one of the most special places on earth. So when I call someone an Ironman here in the finish line in New Zealand, for some reason it has that something little extra, and it always has. I could never explain it. I'd go home and go, what was that? What was that? And I just think it was the community having that extra spirit of supporting the athletes. They welcome them with open arms, and they appreciate performance. Hi, I'm Mike Reilly. This is the Greg Bennett Show. Any questions?
Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show, presented by Any Question. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and I've just finished a really wonderful conversation with the voice of Ironman, Mr. Mike Reilly. Mike recently retired from calling races, actually just December 10th, 2022 at Ironman New Zealand, after 40 years of calling endurance sports events from triathlon and running and everything else in between. And, you know, he coined the phrase, "You are an Ironman," and that we talk about a lot in this episode, and just the meaning of that and how it impacted hundreds of thousands of people all around the world, and just the sport of triathlon and what it's about. This was a really special episode. I felt so fortunate that Mike sat down with me for an hour 10 and just shared his journey and love of the sport of triathlon and his struggle with, you know, giving it away. He's very passionate about the world of triathlon, but you know, he's a grandpa with family and kids and realizes that he can't be away every single weekend. A little bit of housekeeping before we go on. Please go check out Any Question. You can find that at anyquestion.com, or go to Any Question at iOS or Android and go check it out. You're going to learn a lot. It really is going to open your eyes. Right now we have over 26 channels, over 45,000 answers, and just some of the most amazing people sharing their knowledge. And you can go check it out, go search and discover all of this content that's already there, or go ask your own questions to anybody that you see on the platform. It truly is a wonderful platform to learn from. So go check it out. That's Any Question. And a little bit of a reminder, please keep the feedback coming. I really appreciate it. If you're inclined, I'd love an Apple review if you think I'm doing a great job. That just helps position this podcast a little bit higher. Remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. All right, today I am joined by an icon and a legend in the world of triathlon and endurance sports. He's done announcing and television for running and triathlon events worldwide since the late 70s. He's had a microphone in his hand for thousands of endurance events. He's best known as the voice of Ironman and has announced hundreds of Ironman events around the world, including 33 Kona Ironman World Championships. Hundreds and thousands of triathletes worldwide have heard his famous phrase, "You are an Ironman." And he has called millions of athletes across the finishing line. An Ironman Hall of Fame, USA Triathlon Hall of Fame member, and a USA Hall of Champions for running. He's a world-renowned race announcer, commentator, podcast host of Find Your Finishing Line, and author to his inspirational book, Finding My Voice. He called his final race December 10th, 2022 at Ironman New Zealand. Over 40 years of calling events. This man is truly an Ironman. It's an honor and just an absolute privilege to have him join me today. So welcome, and thanks for joining me on The Greg Bennett Show, Mike Reilly. How are you, mate?
I am fantastic, Greg, and thank you for that introduction. Sometimes when I hear that much, I go, who did that?
Isn't it funny?
Who is that?
Who's that guy?
Somebody said, like the late 70s. I go, really, that long? Oh my God.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it dates you, but it's also, you must sit back and just go, wow, that guy's been pretty busy. That guy's been pretty busy. And it's amazing the impact that you've had in the endurance community, especially triathlon. And I kind of want to start this show by firstly saying a massive congrats and just a huge thank you from the entire triathlon community for your contributions to, the world of triathlon and everything you've brought to it. You really sold the show. And I think that's just amazing what you achieved and you did for the sport. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that more than you can imagine. And, it's interesting because I never really wanted to do anything so that Mike Reilly would be the center of the stage, because I learned early on when you get on a microphone, it's not about you, especially when I'm bringing across, professionals and age groupers that have gone through, some of them have gone through hell to even get to the start line. So knowing that, I always believed and realized it's about them. That's all I wanted to do was praise people, because I remember finishing races and I'd hear my name and go, that is, fantastic. My work paid off. Somebody recognized it. That's all I wanted to do all those years. Well,
mate, this show, this episode, I want to make it about you. You've made it about others for 40 years, but for me, as a fan of the sport, as a fan of yours, I want to make this show about you. I'm fascinated about your story, about your journey, and everything you learnt over the years. So, I guess I almost want to start at the finishing line, because the first question I really have for you is the decision to retire. What was that process like?
It was a long, tough process. Whenever you go through tough decisions in your life, you go back and forth with yourself. And obviously I had conversations with my wife and kids and people close to me, and just kept going back and forth. I'd make a decision one day and the next day I go, nah, I can do another year. And then you'd go the next day. Now I'd get done with an event and go, I'm beat up. I'm not 45 anymore. And the voice was taking longer to recover. It was a process where something besides me was telling me it was time. It was like it was just written in the cards, and it wasn't one exact moment where I go, oh, I'm done. It was just this long process. And when I made the call to Ironman and let them know, that was even very hard to do. And afterwards I go, what did I do? So it was, when something's, Greg, a part of your life for so long, and sure, people identify me as from what I've done, but my identification is with my family and, trying to be a strong husband, father, papa, grandpa, and that's my world when I come home. So that world, I was always a lot of times put by the side because of what I was doing for work, which was my passion. And both were pretty well balanced. But, as you get older, you go, wait a minute, am I going to keep repeating the cycle of being gone now for my grandkids? Missing parties and anniversaries and birthdays? At the end, I said to myself, I've paid my dues. I've given it one heck of a run. And it's just time.
Yeah.
At the end, I go, it's just time.
It's like you've had your turn. Laura and I always talked about when we retired from, racing the sport ourselves. It was like we got to have our turn. And when you have that outlook, that you immediately turn it to being grateful that you actually got to have that turn and that opportunity, and you made the most of it. And that's you 100% did that. How many weekends a year on average were you sort of away doing these events?
Oh gosh, I always equated it to I about 120 room nights in hotel rooms. 120 days, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, and that was the other tough part, Greg. As you know, we're in the weekend business, and even when I wasn't announcing during the week. I helped start active.com, and I worked in the endurance business. I sold Saucony running. Everything was the weekend. And I'd come home and then leave again for an event that maybe I was selling something at. So that's why it was always a little tougher. If you and I could have traveled Tuesday through Thursday, it'd have been a piece of cake.
No, I get it.
But the weekend just became somebody else's weekend and not yours. So it's just, it was a long process, but I'm never going to kick myself, look back at it and say, I wish I'd done something different. I did exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the final race a couple of weeks ago, well, let's look at two final races, because I think there's Kona Ironman World Championships, and then there's also New Zealand, which was your actual final race calling. Those moments at those events, hitting midnight at those and putting the microphone down, what was that feeling like? Yeah,
walking away, the Kona, since it was 2 races in 3 days.
That was a lot for you. Oh my God.
My head, I'm thinking, okay, you decided to do 2 races in 3 days. And like I said before, I'm not 45.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
So wrapping my head around that and knowing the logistics of what we had to pull off and all that good stuff, that kind of overrode a lot until about, I woke up Saturday morning going, okay, we're doing this again. Okay, get your stuff together. You're talking to yourself. The voice felt okay, and I was happy about that. But then it became about 8:00, Greg, on Saturday night, and I'm going, oh my gosh, this is really kind of it.
Yeah.
And then 9:00 came, then 10:00 came. And then about 10:30, I went down to the finish line, as I do, bringing people in. And I'm seeing people come in like Cherie Gruenfeld, who I've known forever and I'm close to. And, I kept talking to myself, hold it together, because other people weren't holding it together. I'd look over at, Diana Birch, and she's kind of looking at me with this sad look. And then even Andrew Messick, and I'm going, wow, what's going on here?
Hang in there, guys.
Jeez, take it easy here. I'm the one that's got to hold my, together. And then my wife was there, my son, my daughter, my daughter-in-law, my best friends in 2nd grade, who is my brother-in-law, and so the family's there, and we're all at the finish line. And then that last half hour, I just kept saying, hold it together, give everybody what they deserve. And, bringing that last person in it was more emotional, I think, for people around me, because I just, what it was like, Greg. Okay, Mike, just keep doing doing what
you're
you do.
In the
keep
game. You're
just,
doing the game. You're in it.
I'm right there. And then, but after we sang Hawaii Aloha and started walking away, I always say I only have one more thing to say, and I yell out those 4 words to everyone, and man, that hit me like a 2x4. And then I realized, wow, this is the last Kona. And then the last happened again in Arizona, the last North America event, and my grandkids were there. And then the last happened in New Zealand. Yeah. It was like I was exhausted with the last. I did, it wasn't one last. So it was a great little finish journey.
Yeah, that's, I think, for somebody like yourself, I think the sport needs to be able to say goodbye to you too. It's not you saying goodbye to the sport. There's a little bit of the sport saying thank you, and a bit of this show is a bit about that. It's like we have enormous gratitude, and Dr. Dan Plews, who's a good friend of mine, and been on the show many times, and he won Ironman New Zealand, and for him the real highlight was the fact that you called him across the line for your very last time, and it means something to people. It's there's a deep meaning there. It's not just words. There's a feeling, and I don't know. It's something a lot more than just hearing somebody's voice. There's true meaning behind it.
Yeah, I had a lot of people come up to me even at those races, and age groupers and pros. And so what some of the pros said to me, who I never, I'm close to a lot of them, but it's not like, we're the best of friends just because you see each other 2 times a year or 3 times a year, but you have respect for one another. And they go, Mike, you don't know what this means to me. I go, really? Yeah, that you're calling me in on my last one. Even Chelsea Sodaro, who's Chelsea Nee Reilly, she's, and I go, really? But age groupers would come up and go, no, you're not really done, are you? Tell me you're not really done. I think they thought I was going to go there was carrying around an oxygen tank with me. I don't know. My friends would say, Reilly, you're going to do this when you're in a wheelchair screaming at people, hurry up, I got to go to bed, get in here,
Yeah.
But it was more unbelievable for people that I hung up the microphone than I think it was for me.
Yeah. Well, I think you had been preparing yourself, like you said, for a while, and everybody else, maybe it felt a little bit sudden. And is there somebody else that's going to be, have you passed it on for who's going to use your phrase, you are an Ironman? Have you sold the rights, or is it, are athletes still going to be able to hear that phrase from somebody else?
They better. I've told, and it's interesting. I worked with somebody years back, and they'd say, Mike, I'm not going to say, you say that. I go, no, you're on the microphone now. I got to go to the bathroom. Do not, this isn't my phrase. I don't own those 4 words. It's for the athletes. It's not ours. It's not whomever's on the microphone.
I love it.
So they need to hear it. And remember, nowadays, everybody's listening online. Their family and friends are waiting for it as much as the athletes.
Yeah.
So no matter who's on the microphone at any event around the world, I hope they do. Funny story. I went to Frankfurt years back to work that event. They asked me to come on over, and I said to the race director, I go, I can say it in German, because I could say it in most all the language. He goes, no, do not do that. They want to hear you are an Ironman, because that's what's in Kona. And so it's like this 4-word universal language. I think they're the 4 greatest words in sport. Better than calling a home run or a soccer goal or whatever it is, because it's for the masses. It's for the everyday people like you and I who go through some incredible journeys to get to a start line. Yeah. And so it's not my words. I would hope, and I know a lot of them will. I mean, be calling out those words.
I love that you say that, and I think it is something for people to really aspire to be able to, cross that line. It's been a hell of a journey to get there. To hear those words just cements it. It's like the exclamation point. It's like you hear those words from you or now from somebody else, but it really does say, hey, you did it. And I think that's really cool. Well, what I want to do right now is rewind the clock. One of my favorite things to do on this show is just to go through the journey and go back to the very start. Tell me about when you sort of first found your passion for the sport of triathlon and endurance sports as a whole. When did that all start? Well,
being in San Diego, I moved to San Diego from Ohio in 76 and got hooked up right away with a running group. I wrestled in college, but I only ran to lose weight, to make my weight. And a friend who I played racquetball with said, hey, we run at Balboa Park every Wednesday night at 5 o'clock. I go, hey, I used to run, in college to lose weight. Mm-hmm. So we go out for a 6-miler cross country in Balboa Park in San Diego, which is, up and down and all that good stuff on trails. And I thought, I don't think I walked for 3 days after that. It's time to stay. I go, these people are insane. How could they, I was just happy to stay with them, but it just beat me up. But I got hooked. I go, this is, 10K race, half marathon race. And then I'd go down to Fiesta Island certain nights of the week, and the Tinley brothers would be down there, and we'd be doing these, what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to swim here and run here and ride here. And, just having a blast. And I go, I just got enamored with it and owned running shoe stores here in San Diego, sold those, and became a rep. So I was always involved. And I was lucky enough to produce my income in endurance early on. So I just got hooked. And then, one time at a race, I couldn't run because I had a bad hamstring, and I went to watch everybody. It was a 10K down at Mission Bay, and the race took off, and the race director goes, what are you doing? I go, I got a bad hamstring. And she goes, I got this microphone and this stand-up megaphone speaker, one of those old and she goes, I printed out the entries, and there was only 250, 300 people in the race. She goes, you call out their names when they finish. You know everybody. I go, well, I don't know everybody. He goes, some people. And it hit me. I go, oh, this is cool. I could crank some of my friends coming in, telling them, next time train or something, So I got on the microphone, started calling people in and saying their name is really all I had. And I saw the looks on their faces, like, and they're waving to me and everything. I go, wave back. Yeah, congratulations, great run.
That's cool.
And I go, that's what I'd want to hear too. You know, I mean, it just was something that I was enamored by.
Yeah.
And so I just started announcing events, and then one event I was running. It was a half marathon, and the race director said, "You got to announce my event." I go, "No, I'm entered. I'm running it." You know, I was running all the time. And he goes, "Well, I'll pay you." I go, "What do you mean you'll pay me?" I go, "Really? You'll pay me?" In my mind, to like talk on the microphone. And I was a member of Toastmasters. I like giving speeches. You know, I always wanted to, because I was in sales, so I wanted to perfect, you know, the craft. And I go, "Oh, okay." I'm thinking to myself, I could run this race next year or another half marathon. And he paid me, and I'm thinking, wow, that's crazy. And so then people asked me to, and it was the hardest thing for me to do. They asked me to announce, and I go, "Can you give me $150?
Yeah. Otherwise, I want to race.
They go, "What?" I go, "Well, you pay for your porta potties, you pay for your pylons, you pay for, you know." They go, "All right," and they were really reluctant, and it was a tough road of being paid to announce. And I talked to a lot of other announcers. I don't know if they didn't see it as a necessity and everything. I saw it as a huge part of the event to take care of the athletes, do what the race director wanted you to do, and then take care of the sponsors publicly. You know, so that's how it all started, and it just kept going from there.
Thank goodness for the hamstring injury, huh? It's like, it's one of those things. I bet you were cursing about having a hamstring injury. You didn't know it was going to set you up for, you know, a career of 40 years or so. And
no kidding.
And just touching on what you were saying about the importance, I've always felt when I look at any sport that, I guess the analogy I'll use is almost like there's a car sitting in a lot. And without a great car salesman, that car is probably just going to sit there. You need the person to be able to sell the product, the person that can show appreciation to the athletes that are racing so they can hear their name, and it makes them feel so special. And it's one area in our sport that I still think we can do even, you know, more. When I look at some of the events that we have, we need to keep investing in the people that add the color, that add the enthusiasm and passion and make people feel special. But you were the start of that. You were the one that actually said, "Hey, this is actually a worthy career, and you need me. You need me to be able to sell the event." When did you first get in contact with sort of Ironman and triathlon? How did that all happen?
Well, I was announcing triathlon events. I actually worked assistant race director and announced the first ever pro triathlon in San Diego.
Okay,
the one in Solana Beach, and you know, with Mark and Dave and Dale Wasescu, you know, all those guys from the early years. And so I was always involved with triathlon, doing, you know, races and then announcing. And then Mike Plant, who lived here in San Diego and ran Running and Triathlon News, he had that publication. He was the one going to Kona announcing the race there, because he always went to cover the, you know, the race for the newspaper, but they had him announce. And then the race director said to him, after the 88 race, "You know, you need help. You can't do this by yourself. This race, you know, there's logistics and everything." He goes, "Well, I got a guy in San Diego, a buddy of mine." And so he called me up and he said, "Valerie Silk would like to talk to you about working with me." And I go, "Really?" And I was scheduled to do the race in 89. I was training for it, you know, the whole deal.
Wow.
And she called up and I said, "Well, Valerie, you know," because she said, "I'll fly you over and give you a room." I go, "Well, I already had that. I'm doing the race." She goes, "Yeah, I saw that, but why don't you announce? You can always do the race later." And I go, "Yeah, I'm training with my butt. I can't." My thing, Greg, was I got to go back and tell the guys that I'm not going to race. They kill me.
No way.
Yeah, you know how that goes, the peer pressure. So I actually turned her down and said, "No, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, but I'll do the race." And then in my mind, I'm thinking maybe we'll talk after that. And then she called back. And then one day she told me what she would pay me, because we never talked money. And I go, "Oh my gosh." I told my wife, I went home and said, "Hey, Valerie called me again." And she said, "God, can't that woman take no for an answer?" I go, "But this is what she wants to pay me." And Rose goes, "You can always do that damn race. Go announce it. We got 2 little kids here, you know, the whole deal." And then I realized it was like being called up to the big leagues, and I went and worked with Mike for 2 years. And
what a christening! Hold on, 89. 89 was your first call, right? At Ironman Kona.
Exactly.
Like, honestly, bringing Mark and Dave in, the ultimate iron battle, the iron war, whatever we call it these days.
Yeah.
I mean, truly the most iconic event our sport has ever seen, I think.
And what people forget is Rick and Dick Hoyt. That's the first year they did the race too.
Yes, of course.
I see this raft going into the water after all the age groupers took off, and I go, "What is this guy doing?" I didn't know who he was.
Yeah,
this is a Boston guy. I didn't, and then somebody told me, and in my mind, I'm going, "Well, gosh, too bad. He'll probably never finish." And he does, and it's just, I had Mark and Dave, Welchie coming in third, introduced to Greg, and then Rick and Dick. It just was.
That was an epic year.
The greatest thing ever. You know?
I look back at that, because I kind of started the sport around 85, 86 in Australia,
right? And
we would get the Ironman event usually about 3 to 6 months later on Wild Water Sports in Australia, and we'd all sit up and watch it. And it was just, I'm a 17-year-old kid at that time. It couldn't have happened at a better time in my life to go, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I was heading off to university and everything, but it was like that, the impact of that year, that event, and what it did to myself, guys like Chris McCormack, Craig Alexander, all of us in Australia, that inspirational 89 triggered a lot of us to go, hey, this is the sport I want to get into. Now, I didn't go win Kona by any means, but the other two did. And I think that actually triggered a whole generation of people, that event.
There's no doubt. I had the same conversation with Cameron Brown when I was in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And he came to the race, and we were together quite a while. And I go, can you believe this? And he goes, Mike, 89. That's what turned me on to this doggone sport.
Yeah.
And here is a 12, 13-time winner of New Zealand. And second a couple of times. You're right. It's just, it inspired a generation that really actually, in my mind, set the foundation and standard for what triathlon racing should be all about.
Yeah, I agree.
And, watching you those years going, I go, how does this guy go full out, the way you raced. And then you'd see, guys like McCormick, oh my gosh, how can they go that fast on the bike? And then knock it off with a great run. I was enamored. I was a fan. And so when I was on the microphone, I probably displayed that along with the other fans in there, there. So maybe it was great I never did the race, because I'm still enamored by people getting it done.
No, I don't know if it would have mattered had you done it or not done it. I think you and I and others, we're just such fans of the sport and the people that do it. It's the people, right? It's not professional athlete versus amateur age. It's everybody.
Right.
It's like this community of people that are all just trying to get more out of life. And when you surround yourself with people that just want to live, it's very, you don't want to leave it. It's kind of like, this is a part of my soul. And hence I have this podcast now. I'm not an athlete by any means anymore, but I love these conversations, because I want to be around these people. When did you first use the phrase, you are an Ironman? When did that all happen? And was that the first time you were there, or was it years later?
No, I never said that in 89 and 90.
Oh, okay.
And then I had a friend in Kona in 91, Dan Trone from San Diego, who I know, and I saw him on a lead drive a few days before the race. I go, hey, Danny, how you doing? I'm all right. He kind of had a bad, I go, what's wrong? He is, I don't think I'm going to do that well. I don't know. My training hasn't been going well. And I just, God, you're running great. I ran with you a couple of times, down on Mission Bay. You're going to be okay. And the year before, he had a great time. And so I just couldn't understand it. I go, well, he's had kind of a bad attitude. The day before the race, I see him checking his bike, and he goes, yeah, I know you tried to pump me up, Reilly, but I don't know about tomorrow. And I go, Dad, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And then it hit me. I go, don't worry, you'll be an Ironman tomorrow. And he, yeah, all right. And he waved to me and walked his bike into transition. So the day comes along, and, back in 91, I mean, there was no spotting. Everything was, guys were calling me from the Queen K on the payphone. Hey, they just went by. I go, how many? 3 of them. Who were they? I don't know. They were going too fast. That was my spotting out there then. And so I didn't know where anybody really was. And then here comes Dan down a lead drive. And I see him. And the other announcer was on the microphone. I go, hey, I got this guy. So I started bringing him in, Dan Trone from San Diego, California. I said his age, the whole deal. And it just hit me. I go, yeah, he is. Dan Trone, you are an Ironman. It was like I was putting it in his face, like I told you so.
Yeah,
I told you.
I love that. Yeah.
He went like 11 hours, 11 something, so it was a
decent
great day.
Yeah.
And he pointed up at me and I pointed back at him. That's kind of where the pointing, sometimes I'll just point at somebody and they point back. And then the crowd set up this roar and I go, wow, they don't really know who Dan is. It's not like he's some famous athlete. I go, that's interesting. So the next person came in and I stayed on the microphone and I go, well, heck, they're an Ironman too. Wow. And I laid it out and the crowd started cheering like crazy. And I go, and then the other announcer didn't really want to say it. And I go, why don't you, they like that. And he goes, no, I'm not saying that. So when he got, they're screaming up, say it. The crowd's yelling. So I got in the microphone and just started ripping it out. And people and the athletes were waving like they were told something that they knew already. Yeah. But that confirmation of it just hit everybody in the heart. It just, and I realized, it's not like I stayed up at night. Oh, what can I say to somebody? Like, when somebody hits a home run or scores a goal, the announcer has a certain, I never thought, I just wanted to congratulate everybody. Well, that was the ultimate congratulation right there. I found it. I knew when I was just aware enough that, this is it. And even when women came in, I at first I go, okay, what should I do? The first woman's coming in and I just said, you are an Ironman because it's an Ironman event. Yeah. And they were waving to me and I go, well, I guess it's okay. So
that's such a wonderful story. It really is because it's come just from you and a mate. And then the reaction of the crowd reinforced it. And then you see the athletes coming in. When anybody says your name, it makes you feel special in any part of your life. If somebody remembers your name or knows your name, we all love our name to be told. But then for that to happen with your name to be told and appreciation and recognition behind it, I can see the impact, and everybody's exhausted too. So it's just kind of like, it's the perfect mix, right?
So even to this day, some still don't hear it. They'll come up, Mike, you didn't call me an Ironman. And the guy's wife will be standing there and she goes, yes, he did. And then I'll look at him, I'll go, you were delirious. He goes, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was. I didn't hear it.
I know. I think I had the same feeling actually. The one time I did Kona 2012, I'm not sure if you were on the women were just brought in and I came in right here. Yes, I was chicked, everybody, if you must know. Yes. Okay, I was walking in with Michael Reilly and a few others. We all had average days. I think we were all 9 hours or something. And so the women had just come in and we were all trying to not be in the women's finishing chute, which is why it's so great the women have their own event now because us pro men, we got to start, but these women also hunted us down and then overtook us and we didn't want to get in the camera shots and everything else. And so I kind of scurried in when I crossed that line at Kona. It was almost, I was happy and joyful to have ticked a box and done it. I was 40, I think I was almost 41. Yeah. So I'd done it before I retired and that's what I'd wanted to do. Just tick the box. But it was definitely one of those where I kind of hid and I don't think you called my name.
Oh my God! Never even got your name. You must have really hid.
No, I did because it was kind of like it's like you don't want to take away that moment for the people that had great races. That was always the predicament we had. If you'd had an average day as a man, you were going to be chicked, and that's how good the women are. By the way, I'm just saying they're phenomenal, and. You have an average day, you're going to be beaten. And I don't want to ruin their day. So that was always it. But, mate, so look, you've done this for so many years. I want to sort of, you have your book, Finding My Voice, which everybody should read. It's absolutely inspiring. So many wonderful stories in there. So please go check it out. Amazon, Walmart, anywhere you want to, any good bookstore you can find it, Finding My Voice. But I want to chat about some of the great stories for you personally. They can either come from the book, as I'm sure they might, but I'd love to just for you to share 2 or 3 of the stories that when you look back that really stand out to you from this past 30, 40 years.
Whenever you do something for the first time, if it was good, you remember it. And that 89 race, the whole experience was like I was on the outside looking in, pinching myself. And then when Mark and Dave set up that performance, and remember being in San Diego Mark was training out of here. I'd sometimes go on the Tuesday run and try to stay with everybody for the first 2 miles, and then they'd take off, And so you knew what he could do. I never knew, Dave being the man. And so that memory is always going to be just really up top for me. Individually, there are so many.
I know.
When I started, I'd bring in the pros and then bring in the fast age groupers. But then all of a sudden, when you start getting to those witching hours of the last 3 hours and see that, 68-year-old grandmother come in who battled breast cancer, and you get to call her name and see her kids in the crowd there for her crying. There are so many like that. The first one that really got me was Sarah Reinerson, the first female amputee to attempt Kona. And she was also living and training in San Diego, so we knew what she was doing. She was part of the Challenge Athlete Foundation. And so everybody, gosh, she's going to do it. She's going to smash it. I was announcing, bringing people to the finish line, and I heard this kind of roar behind me, and it's where the bike ended, right behind me before they went into transition. And I kind of heard this wailing, this crying. I turn around. There's Sarah with her hands on her knees and people talking to her. And I'm going, what's going on? And then it hit me. I go, oh, my God, it's past 5:30. She missed the bike cutoff. It's the first time I was just stunned and devastated. I go, what? That couldn't have happened. She can't go on. I'm talking to myself. Finally, one of the assistants in the announcer tapped me. Mike, somebody's coming in. I completely just spaced out and didn't even think about the finish line. And here I was bringing people in. So I had to turn the mode back to on again and bring somebody. But the rest of the day, I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So when I went down to the finish line, the later hours as I do, Sarah was sitting there with her mom. And I just went over to her real quick in between finishers. I go, Sarah, and she goes, Mike, I'm doing this next year. I'm getting this done. And she had this just look on her face. I go, good for you. And I'm thinking a year's a long time, but she set that motto out of unfinished business and came back the next year. And when I brought her in, I mean, there wasn't a dry, everybody knew her story. I didn't have to say anything. But then when she was coming in, and she came in, I don't know why I was down at the finish chute. I don't know, maybe because just for her. I can't remember everything, all those quick decisions I make of moving around. But I was down there waving my towel as I always did and brought her in, and I could hardly get the words out. And my voice cracked. I'm thinking, don't scream into the mic. But I was just like one of the fans screaming because Sarah did it. So that one always sticks out with me because it proved that, when you get knocked down, you get back up. And I also knew that proved to everybody that was seeing it, that, you know what am I complaining about? So finishes like that set the foundation of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live my life. I had examples in front of me, 2,500 of them at every race. So those types of stories. And when I'd bring someone in, especially a family member or a relative or a dear friend, when you knew what they went through to get there, bringing them home was just a pure pleasure. To the greatest call I ever made.
It really is like this human emotion, right? It's like at the core, when you see people that are, to your point with Sarah, that have been knocked down and they just keep getting back up and they keep fighting, and that human spirit, it truly does just stop you in your tracks, stop you complaining. It affects your gratitude. It affects the way you look at life. It affects all of us in a way. And that's why that Ironman finishing line is one of the most alive places that you can ever exist, ever be, right? It's like, it's a human connection like none other.
Yeah, I'll have people come up to me. It was Lake Placid this year, and that race had been going on for 22, 23 years. Guy came up to me and said, Mike, I did this race back in the early 2000s. And I go, wow, that's great. He goes, I'm here volunteering, but I need to tell you a story about when you brought in an 18-year-old who came in right before the midnight hour. He had crashed his bike. He had a broken collar. He was all wrapped up, and you gave him everything, but I'll never forget his finish. And here I was in my 30s, and an 18-year-old was inspiring me. And I'm thinking, wow, that's, you don't get that a lot in life, where an 18-year-old is inspiring a 30-some-year-old. But you're right, that finish line, it's life.
Yeah.
You go through the ups and downs, and you got to get to the finish line every day sometimes. And when I'd see people do that or overcome addictions in their life, and they go, Mike, this helped cure me. I mean, think about that. Someone's homeless, and I brought some homeless people in that have brought their lives back from addiction, and they go, "This helped cure me. This is how I transform myself." And when I tell people that are kind of outside the industry, they go, "What?" I go, "I'm telling you, it can transform people because they tell me it's not. I'm not trying to preach it to you. I've seen it. I've been told about it, and I've witnessed it. So." It happens.
For people that are struggling in life, it's like, let's give them a seat at an Ironman for the last 3 to 4 hours and just let them witness human performance and let them witness human emotion at a next level. It can really have an impact and trigger you to make the changes you need, right? It's so empowering that I think everybody should be sitting at least once, go sit at a finishing line, especially in those midnight hours, and watch some of those human stories. During these years, have you had any kind of low times or any times where, you've had bloopers or mishaps, anything that's kind of, you're like, oh, I got away with that one moments?
Well, when you're live on the microphone, you never get away with it. People can forgive you, but they don't forget. Yeah, I've said a few things that I wasn't proud of.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Mainly, and it was really things, Greg, that trying to be funny. And I learned that early on, and I learned a lesson quick in the early 90s. And I said something about some athletes from another country and about their swimming abilities. And as soon as I said it, a lot of people laughed and thought it was funny. But then I thought, what am I doing? Why would I diss or say something disrespectful to a group of people just because?
And it's not even you, right? It's like it's an out-of-body experience. You're like, I'm not even that person. I was just trying to be funny. What?
Yeah. And so I learned, and I when I mentor people, I go, you don't need to try to be funny. If you just be natural. And sometimes I'd say, and people start laughing. I go, I didn't say that to be funny. And I'm going, what are they laughing at? And people, that was good, Mike. And I'm thinking, okay. And then other things, when you try to be funny, you're not going to be. I'm not a Robin Williams. You can't do that type of stuff when you're publicly on a microphone. So I learned my lesson early, and so I just wanted to make sure that I appealed to everybody, because I knew everybody out there listening was from 18 to 80 years old. And I knew some groups wouldn't understand some of the things I said, but it's a young sport. I think the older generation appreciated that passion, because I would tell people, I go, you're here now, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, your athlete comes in, go get dinner, come on back to the final few hours, because you'll witness more passion right here at this finish line than maybe you have over the last year. And when I say that, they look at me, but I've had people come back and go, Mike, you were right. That I've never felt what I felt when I saw those people finish. I had 6 of our very dear friends fly into Arizona for the last race. They were racing, they're racers. They raced the Baja 1000. So they flew a private plane in to come watch my last few hours. So they got there about 6 o'clock in Arizona. Oh, wow. 4 of them had never seen an Ironman finish line. And I've been together and are best friends for 30 some years. But it just never, two of the 6 did. Yeah. And I could tell that I'm bringing people in and they're sitting there watching, the looks on their faces. They came up to me in unison after the race. Why didn't you convince us to come here? So I go, I've been telling you to come to a finish line for years, and they're not in that world, but somebody from the outside sees that and they go, I have never seen anything like that. Never seen anything like that.
It really is special. What did you prefer? You preferred the live commentary over television? You like to be on ground versus the TV. I mean, you did a bit of both, but you spent most of your time on ground, it seemed.
Yeah, I started out on ground, and then I was doing TV for the Chicago Triathlon in the years, about that race. Everybody was there, so I would do the television with that and work with a local sports person there, and I liked it, but after a while I go, this is like, I'm faking my passion at a certain time. You know what I mean? I was announcing it live for the television, but yet it was 10 or 15 minutes after the fact of something that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I did an okay job. They kept wanting me to come back. And finally, I go, I'd rather just announce a race. They looked at me like I was nuts. What do you mean? You just rather do the live, not TV? I go, I don't need to be on TV. It's not,
having
I don't know
a producer
if it wasn't who
in
I
your
was,
ear.
but I just knew in my gut, I go, I think I can be of more service, so to speak, if I do live. I'd much rather just do voiceover for it afterwards. And that's what I ended up doing. I started doing voiceover for it. And that was even kind of hard.
I can't stand voiceover. It's already been done and you got to be enthusiastic about it.
I'm looking at the screen going, all right. Oh yeah, he passed him.
It's the worst.
And then I just said, Mike, just do the live. Just be live.
Yeah.
And because I knew that I could have an instant impact and the athletes could hear it right then and there. And it was about them. Sure, you want to have a great television broadcast like the show for Ironman or the other great triathlons out there. They help promote the sport. And the people we have on the microphone doing that they're fantastic. But it just wasn't me.
No, I can appreciate that. I'm certainly have only done a few, nothing remotely like you have. But the times I've had to do the voiceover, it's been very uncomfortable. Television, when I've done, I was actually with NBC in 2019 for the Ironman, and I was up in their offices. And I was in studio with McKeely Jones and a couple of others. And it just, you got your producer in your ear. Lovely people, lovely folks, by the way, NBC Sport, really great people. But you got the producer in your ear and, Greg, what are you going to talk about when we come back from, this commercial or whatever? But like, well, I'm going to talk about, Patrick Langer having a really great swim coming out of the back of okay, so you're going to say exactly that. Okay, McKeely, what are you going to say? And so then you'd almost talked about it and then you had to talk about it. Then you had to be like almost presenting it like it was your first time. Oh, and Greg, you've got 20 seconds to wrap it up. Oh my God. I found that so difficult to go, okay, Patrick Langer's had a great swim and, this has set him up for an amazing race. That's the big story that's come out of the swim today. And McKeely, what do you got? And it's like you have these little moments and I'm like, I found that really frustrating, to be honest.
You brought back memories of that happening to me, and I'm thinking, well, I have no control here. When I'm live, sure, nobody's really telling me what to say. I mean, race director may throw something up. Hey, we've got to mention this. All right, I got it.
Yeah.
That type of thing. That's as hard as it would go. But that's why I have so much respect for Michael Lovato and Didi and the rest of the crew that does not only Ironman races. And I watch them go, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. Okay, bully for them. That is. How do they keep talking like that?
I know. Look, I think all of us just love the sport and we all find our little way of being involved. I'd love to do more commentary work. Unfortunately, my work has taken me away, but to do the Collins Cup last year and I did it side by side with Phil Liggett, which for me was a bit of a career highlight, just to be able to announce a race with Phil Liggett. It would have been a career highlight had I been able to announce with you, Mike, somewhere. Because you're around people that you've admired for so long. Tell me about, I want to move on to your book. What was the process like, of writing the book, finding my voice? Was that something you'd always thought you wanted to do? What was that process?
It was about 10, 15 years ago. I keep a diary of every race and
wow.
And people started coming up and telling me their story. I'd meet them at a race and go, Mike, I need to tell you what happened to me. I go, yeah, what? And they tell me the story of what happened in their life and and then I walk away and somebody else would. Then I'd start receiving emails everybody wants to kind of tell me their story. And I think it was my son said, Dad, you're the connection for them. Who else are they going to tell a story to at the event organization? Not like they're going to send an email to the CEO or send an email to PR. So you're there and they can touch you and see you and get a hold of you and you listen. And I go, of course I do. I mean, because I want to know their story. And I'd write notes down the next race they were doing. And then they started putting it in the bios. So I just started kind of documenting and putting them all together. Here it is. Mike Reilly is receiving these stories. And I felt it would be selfish not to pass some of them on. I really did. And so then I started, well, maybe I'll put them in a book form. And that was like 5-6 years ago, and it took me forever to pull the trigger just because I was probably lazy about it.
Well, it's a big undertaking, mate. It's the fact that you got across the finishing line. It's huge.
We went through the process with an agent in New York, finding me a publisher, that whole deal. And my son, again, who's much smarter than I am, said, well, I'm looking into this. We're going to self-publish. One, you're not beholden to a publisher. Even though they want to give you money up front, doesn't mean you can't make more on your own, or you can't have more control, So we self-published, and that was like going back to college again, for God's sakes.
Drinking through a fire hose, right?
What? and it was a great process, but it was something that was a real labor of love, and that's what got me through that. And so then I wanted to share the stories that impacted me and changed my life in a certain way, and I know it changed others. And the toughest part, Greg, was leaving some stories out.
Yeah.
I mean, ones that I wanted. I couldn't write War and Peace, for goodness sakes, but it's like it could, because there's so many stories out there. I'm sorry. That's why I'm continuing with my podcast, because it's like, every podcast can be a chapter of a book. And that's why I'm continuing to do it that way.
I love it. And I love that you're a storyteller. You're getting stories out of everybody else. Your book is fantastic. The reviews are all phenomenal. How have you seen the reaction to the book? What's the reaction been like?
The book business is interesting because not everybody buys books. And, so I've called 500,000 people in Ironman. Are 500,000 people going to buy the book? Well, no. So it started out a little slow, and it just started building. And then when I'd go to an event or I'd go to a signing, I said, I'm going to go to the event. I'll take 100 books and sit there. And so I'd sign them and sell them. And I go, well, that's pretty cool. And I'd sell out. I'd go to the next event. Oh, I'll take 150. I'd sell out. There was no limit on it. And this last year has been phenomenal. The other thing is I did the audiobook. I narrated that. And that's still the strongest of anything. It always has been over print. Was that audiobook. And it's, it's cheaper to buy. People buy audiobooks all the time. And they were happy that I recorded it.
I love that you did record it, because I'm an Audible book. I'm an audiobook myself. I like to go through, a book a week usually is what I go, for my runs and everything these days. Most of mine are, business or leadership type books these days. But it's really great to just have a book that's a little just stories, and it's just so, you don't want to stop whatever you're doing. I'm always like, okay, maybe I'll run another mile just to get through more, because I don't think I've read a book, picked up and actually physically read a book for many years. But Audible books, I go through them like you wouldn't believe. I love them.
That was an interesting process. I'm just really glad I did it.
Yeah, and just to hear your voice. What about the podcast? You said you're going to keep that going. It's a fascinating show where basically you're talking to anybody that has, successful people and across varying backgrounds. How are you finding the people you want on your show? Is it just people that you want to hear stories from, or are they reaching out to you?
When I wrote the book, my goal was not, Mike Reilly, I'm going to try to inspire and motivate people. And because I've given motivational talks at corporations, and I don't call them motivational talks. I tell stories of other people and what they've overcome. And I let the audience pull out of it what they will.
Yes.
Because not everybody's on the same level at the same time of their life. So you can't key in on one certain thing and think you're going to hit the masses. You're not. So writing the book, I told different stories for different types of people, whether it was about somebody losing a family member or somebody having cancer or whatever. And so the podcast is a continuation of that. Sure, I'll have pros on, like I've had, Sam Long or Tim Don, but then I have age groupers. I have everyday people on who have overcome, who people don't know, who may only have 200 Instagram followers. I don't care. But when I heard the story, I go, you got to be kidding me. He overcame that to get to the start line of that race. People have to hear this. They have to hear his story. So those are the ones that seem to be having the longevity. People will send me a message, I listened to so-and-so, and I'm thinking, that was last year in June.
It's amazing
that I did that one. But they just listened to it. So it's timeless because their story has a beginning, but that has no real end, except that they help themselves out and cured. So people get to pull out of it what they will. They get to pull out of it what is good for them. And so that's how I choose guests, that the ones that inspire me. And sure, I'll have a running guru on, or Mark and Alan and I went back and forth a couple of times, which was very cool. I talked to Dave McGilvery, the Boston, Dave, the Boston.
Dave. Yeah, I know Dave well. Yeah.
And Dave's a, very inspirational person. So when people hear what he did, they go, what am I? I got to get off my couch. And that's all I want to do, is be able to inspire people through others. Sure, I can tell stories or tell people that, you know what, you need to do this in your life to be able to get to do this, because I've done it. And I do that to a certain respect, but I let other people tell their story and let people get out of it what they will.
I started my podcast just over 3 years ago, and
right.
I really came at it in a direction of like, what can we learn from successful people? What can we learn? This, how do they sleep? How do they eat? Blah, blah, blah. And it was all very high performance type focus. And then over time, I kind of realized, one, everybody has a story. Everybody I meet has a journey, and it's worth sharing. I've become a far better listener. I like to think anyway. I have, and because I'm fascinated by people and their journeys and story. And rather than going, what can we learn from this person, and being really specific, I just want to have a conversation and hear the human side of this person. Like you, I think we're very fortunate to have these shows where people are willing to come and just have a conversation with us and have them share their stories. And that's why I'm loving this conversation, for that exact reason. Just hearing some of your stories, and very fortunate. I feel very grateful for this show. I want to finish up the show before I let you go, just and talking more a little about the world of triathlon and getting your thoughts about where it is now and where do you think it's going. You've retired from calling the race. I assume you'll still kind of keep an interest, as has been such a major part of your life. But what do you think of the sport now and where it's going?
I think it's okay. As you know, there's so many factions with different event companies and organizations now, and then the pros, banding together, and the PTO, and I think all that stuff is really good for the sport. I think the thing that may not be as good is the lack of communication between those people.
Yeah.
Because I never feared competition when I was selling running shoes to whatever I was doing, because competition can only make you greater. It can only make you stronger. If you fear it for the right reasons, because you know what? They may be doing something better than me. But I always communicated with my competitors. If I was selling a running shoe, I wanted to know what Nike was doing. I wanted to know what New Balance was doing. I was friends with the reps, and even though we were in competition with one another, for that almighty dollar, for that almighty sale, we respected what we did. And at times we'd break bread and have a good time together, but then go out the next day and try to beat each other up. That's what competition's all about.
Yeah.
I think the sport may be lacking that a little bit. And it takes really big people to sit down at a table when you believe that other person's trying to take money out of your pocket, or trying to take, constituents away from you, or whatever it may be. So that's a tough road. And I would hope that in the years to come, that the organizations would not solidify in the fact that they're all together doing, one thing. They keep their lanes, their categories as they see they want to keep them. But then they have the lines of communication open. And, this goes way back, Greg, to even when other organizations came into the running business and somebody had put on a race on the same weekend as this other race in the country. I go, why'd they put it on the same weekend as Gasparilla? When it's in Atlanta, I go, why would they do that? They actually take competitors away from one another, and it was just really a lack of communication. So I think it's good. I like what everybody's doing. I think they're trying to, create their own lane, their own category. You always have that Ironman in the room because they have so many events and they're so well established. But that doesn't mean you're always the best just because you're the biggest. So to be the best, you have to know who your competition is and have the lines of communication open. You really do.
We have so many players right now, whether you're even looking at the Super League Triathlon to the PTO and their whole series and the Collins Cup that they're creating, and then Ironman. And then you have events, like Clash Endurance and a few others popping up around the world. And of course, you still have World Triathlon and all the ITU racing in the Olympics. The one area that I think we're still missing and we could do better as a sport is probably the grassroots racing, the entry-level racing. I do fear that people come into the sport and maybe they've done one small race and then immediately they want to do an Ironman, and they're kind of 2 or 3 years and they're out of the sport altogether. I still fear that our retention, it could be better. And I think Ironman should stay as it is, but I think they could do more for getting people into the sport and making it so it's not just to be an Ironman that makes you a triathlete. I feel like, that's one area I think the sport could do better. But honestly, I look at all these different events around the world and all these people, I do think they're all trying to make the sport better. There is that impact. And I think, to your point, if they can communicate with each other, work with each other, yes, compete a little bit, because to your point, it does get the best out of people. But I think it's in a good place. I think there's more money pouring in. That doesn't always mean better, but I think if you're a professional triathlete right now, it does. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and the different organizations, obviously, they promote the sport. They may reach out to a different group of people that one doesn't reach out to. So we all want the sport to grow, and the more people that are exposed to it, the higher likelihood that'll happen.
Yeah.
But you're right. On the entry level, there used to be so many entry level races, sprint this and sprint that. Olympic distance. And
missing the Olympic distance. Yeah.
Yeah. They just don't see it. And the logistics, and I've talked to a lot of race directors, it's a hard distance to make any money at, because you're taking up the same city streets and the whole deal, but then you don't have as many people doing the race. It's just, that's always been, and I'm going to the Endurance Exchange Conference in Austin, put on by USAT at the end of the month, and I'm just going as a fan now. I don't have to MC or anything like that.
Yeah,
you don't know how good that feels. I want to sit out in the audience and just
enjoy it.
Be there. And talk with the other event directors and everything, and kind of see where they're going. And after that, maybe I'll even get a better understanding of how the sport's doing, especially here in the U.S. But those shorter distance races have always been tough for event directors to put on.
That's good feedback. Well, mate, I want to finish up with just some more rapid fire questions. You up for it?
Yeah.
All right. There's a mixture of a bit of fun and a bit of serious. So let's start with one book you would recommend.
The Power of One.
Wasn't that a great book?
I've read I got every one of Bryce Courtney's books right here.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
There's a whole nother story because I got to spend a week with him in Australia.
Yeah. What were some of the other books? I did read a couple. It's 20 years ago since I read.
Oh my gosh, The Potato Factory, Jessica.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, she's got so many. What am I at a blank? I'm looking up at my bookshelves. Put them someplace else.
No, that's a good one.
Yeah, he's a ton of books.
All right. What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to fake it because it doesn't work. And I tell my 18-year-old self to set bigger goals.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do at 18 because you're still trying to figure life out and relationships and stuff. But I think if you set bigger goals, it eventually will happen.
But
if you don't set them, it'll never happen.
I love that. Reach for the sky, people. You can always land on the moon. All right, mate. 2 most used apps on your iPhone or your phone.
Most used apps on my iPhone. There's a first. I've never been asked that before. I'd probably say Instagram and probably WhatsApp. That's how I communicate with so many people around the world.
Perfect.
Back and forth with that. Yeah.
We got to get you on Any Question, the app I'm building with Ed Baker.
I know.
Yeah, I think we've sent the invite out to you. All right. What 3 people would you want to have dinner with, non-family, living or dead?
Bono.
Nice.
John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
And I'd like to have Margaret Thatcher.
Wow. That's a great dinner.
Do
you mind if I wait the tables for that one?
Yeah.
I love it. All right, here's one. Here's an opinion one. Greatest triathlete of all time, male and female.
Paula Newby Fraser.
9-time Kona Ironman winner. Legend.
Mark Allen.
Yeah, it's hard not to go say Mark, especially if you're a bit old school. Yeah. I think we all have a soft spot for Mark. All right, out of 10, how cool are you?
Out of 10, how cool am I? Well, when I dance to my wife and kids, I'm like a 3. And, I've danced a lot at finish lines, and some people come and go, Reilly, you got some moves. And I go, there's my wife over there. Go tell her.
Oh, that's great.
They all think I dance like Elaine on Seinfeld. So,
oh my God.
So I'm probably a 5 when it comes to cool.
That was great. I've still got the image of Elaine.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. All right. Who would you want to play a movie of your life?
Matt Damon.
Nice. All right. This is a big one coming up. Which decade of music is best?
Oh, it's the 80s, hands down.
I couldn't agree more.
I can play everything at the finish line, but all of a sudden, when the 80s come on and I play a few from that, 18-year-olds are singing every lyric word for word as is the 75-year-old. I go, the 80s just are like everybody.
Yeah.
Even people who were into the 90s and something about the 80s.
Well done. Thank you for that. I've had so many guests recently that have said, 2000, 2010, or the 90s gets mentioned. I'm like, the 80s, when you think of Simple Minds, U2, The Cars, The Cure, Talking Heads.
Everybody.
My God, I could just keep going on and on.
the 80s set the foundation for it all. Really, I mean, obviously the 60s set a lot of foundations.
Oh, well, yes, I agree.
Something about the 80s. Everybody's enamored by the 80s.
All right. Where's some in the world you haven't been you'd like to go?
I'd really South Africa.
Go on a safari.
I was jealous. My daughter and her husband on their honeymoon went down there, and I was so jealous. With the elephants and the whole deal.
That's where Laura and I did our honeymoon as well back in 2004.
Did you really?
Yeah. It was truly the greatest trip of our lives. So please go do it.
Yeah, right? I got to do that.
Just go do it. And don't worry about the money. It'll be forgotten about. Just go and do it right. do it. Go do it right. You know what I mean? Enjoy it and then forget about it.
I never have. One time when we took a big trip and I go, you know what? We're upgrading to first class.
Yes.
And my wife said, what's that going to cost? I go, don't ask. Yeah. And then during the trip, she goes, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yes.
And I said, I'm so glad you didn't ask.
It only would have dampened the feeling. No, it's so true, isn't it? These experiences, sometimes you just got to go do it. All right, last question for you. Greatest movie of all time?
On the Waterfront. It's paired with Shawshank Redemption. But yeah, On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando.
I like that. Great. You know, I ask these questions just for myself, right? I have this list of books and movies.
Have you ever seen On the Waterfront?
I don't think I have. I feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah, it's a raw boxing movie with Marlon Brando, probably the greatest role he ever had. And it's, it's old school. Back in the, I don't know when that movie was made. Yeah. Probably in the 60s, But it introduced me to the, I grew up in a nice neighborhood. It just introduced me to a raw way of living. I go, who lives like that? Well, a lot of people do.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to check it out. 100% On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando. And look, don't get me wrong. My favorite movie is a bit dated these days too. It's Chariots of Fire. And, that's early 80s now, which I guess is getting out there.
I took my dad to Chariots of Fire. My dad was a miler. Owned the Ohio record, was the third fastest miler in the country as a high schooler. Ran with Jesse Owens at Ohio State.
Wow.
And I took him to Chariots of Fire, and he goes, I don't get it. I go, what do you mean you don't get it? You were a runner. Well, we never did all those things those guys did. And I think he was taking it to the bare bones.
Yes.
He was running on cinder tracks, getting spiked, in the calves and all that stuff. And I thought this was a great movie, and I was so disappointed. My dad didn't think it was like a great movie, and here he was, this big time runner. I didn't get it.
He was really judging its accuracy because he was like, hang on,
I didn't know it wasn't that accurate on some things.
Yeah, well, it's like if a great triathlon movie ever comes out, you and I aren't going to sit back and go and probably just enjoy it. We're going to be like, that's not right. That's not what happened. You just become a little bit more judgmental. Well, Mike, this has been. What's your plan to fill your days now? Over your
a lot of people have been asking me that. I posted a picture the other day. I rode my gravel bike in the morning, and then my good friend down the street, he goes, "Hey, I want to go play 9 holes." And I go, "Yeah." So I grabbed my golf clubs, and I rode my bike in the morning and played 9 holes in the afternoon. I go, now this I can get used to.
But we're going to see you. We're going to see you at events and things. As a fan, are you going to still put a couple on your calendar and stay in the community so we all get to see you?
Yeah, I'm still trying to see what next year looks like.
Yeah.
The whole idea too was not to be gone much on weekends, and I don't want to come to an event and the other announcers and people come up to me, Mike, how come will you call me an Ironman? Will you? I don't know. We just got to figure out what it looks like. I'm still trying to figure that out, but I got no worry about filling my days. It'll be fine.
Well, Mike, I'm a huge fan.
Thank you,
and I
Greg.
just truly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your stories and your journey, and just so much knowledge. I really, really do appreciate you for coming on.
And thank you for what you've done in the sport. Your performances have thrilled, oh my God, so many people. I just couldn't believe some of the things you did. and then to be able to continue this with the podcast and staying out there, and it's interesting because when you have a foundation of anything, you want that foundation to stay. You don't want to live in it. You don't want to live in the history. You want to keep moving forward. But you're a big part of the foundation of the sport, and I'm glad you're still a big part of it today.
Well, mate, those words are very, very thoughtful and very kind. I appreciate you very much, mate. But again, thanks for coming on. And for everybody listening, you can find all the show notes and timestamps and everything else at bennettendurance.com/media. Thanks again, buddy.
Aloha.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.